When you see a meerkat, they look like these adorable little secret agents, right? But what if I told you they're not just hiding from predators? They're hiding a really dark secret. In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on this surprisingly brutal, almost Machiavellian world of the meerkat.
Okay, so let me ask you, what's the first thing that pops into your head when you think of meerkats? I'm guessing for most of you, it's something, well, something pretty specific and probably pretty wholesome.
Yeah, you're probably picturing exactly this, right? These adorable little guys standing guard, looking out for the whole family. It's the ultimate symbol of cooperation, of community. It just looks like perfect animal harmony. Well, get ready for a serious reality check, because that popular image, it's pretty much a myth. In fact, one scientific headline summed up the reality this way, and I'm quoting directly here. Baby murdering meerkat alpha females enslave subordinates as wet nurses. Wow. Yeah, you heard that right. Suddenly not so cute, are they? So let's actually dig into what that wild headline means for life inside a real meerkat mob. All right, let's dive in and bust this myth wide open. We're going to look at the hard evidence that paints a much more ruthless picture of the meerkat world. So, the very first thing you have to understand is that meerkat society is, it's no democracy. It's not some happy little commune. The research, which is based on decades of observation, actually describes it as a brutal dictatorship, and it's all ruled by one single dominant female. So, who exactly are the players in this ruthless game? Let's take a look inside what researchers literally call the meerkat mob or gang. And this is where you really see the stark reality of the mob's hierarchy. On one side, you've got the dominant queen. She's almost always the heaviest female, and she completely monopolizes breeding. We're talking about 80% of it. Her pups, they get all the priority care. And then you have everyone else, the subordinate females. Their own ability to reproduce is actively suppressed. They're basically forced to be helpers, babysitters, bodyguards, and they often lose a ton of weight caring for the queen's babies. And what happens if they dare to have their own young? They're often violently kicked out of the group. This all leads to a really key strategy in the queen's playbook, and it's something called allolactation. Now, that's just the scientific term for wet nursing. In a lot of other animals, this is a cooperative thing, But for meerkats, it's basically a form of enslavement. These subordinate females are forced to nurse the queen's pups, and often this happens right after their own babies have been killed. So, how does this queen maintain such an iron-fisted grip on power? Well, it's not just about simple intimidation. It's a calculated and frankly horrifying cycle of violence. Let's just walk through this process because it happens over and over again. Okay, so step 1, a subordinate female actually manages to give birth. Step 2, the dominant queen, who is usually pregnant herself, steps in and commits infanticide. She kills the pups. Step 3, the grieving mother is either thrown out of the group to fend for herself, or she's forced to stay. And then step 4, this is the truly twisted part. She is then coerced into becoming a wet nurse for the pups of her own baby's killer. She's literally paying for her spot in the group with the very milk that should have gone to her own young. And don't think this is just some rare, horrible event. The data on this is just chillingly clear. Look at the survival rate for a subordinate's litter. It all comes down to the queen's pregnancy schedule. In the month after the queen gives birth, a subordinate's litter has a pretty decent, almost 72% chance of survival. But in the month before she gives birth, that survival rate absolutely plummets to just over 9%. The timing is everything, and it's completely, deliberately lethal. So why? Why all this brutality? Well, from a purely evolutionary standpoint, it's a cold, hard, and very effective calculation. Killing off rival pups immediately reduces competition for food and care. It secures a bunch of dedicated, enslaved nannies for her own offspring. This allows her pups to gain more weight, which is absolutely crucial for their survival. It's a ruthless strategy, for sure, but it's an incredibly effective way to make sure her genes are the ones that get passed on. But the story gets even more fascinating because this isn't just about social drama. When we zoom in, we can see there's a hidden biological impact. There's a real cost being paid, right down at the cellular level. Okay, to get this, we need to talk about something called telomeres. The easiest way to think about them is like those little plastic tips on your shoelaces, But they're for your DNA. They're these protective caps at the very ends of our chromosomes. And every time a cell divides, they get just a little bit shorter. So, in a way, they're like a biological clock, ticking down. And here's the really crucial part. Things like stress and competition can make that clock tick a whole lot faster. So here's the core problem for a little meerkat pup. The research shows that as the number of other pups in the group goes up, so does the competition. And that competition has a direct, measurable effect. The telomeres in those pups get shorter. More competition literally wears them down at a genetic level. But here is a fascinating twist. Scientists decided to run an experiment. They gave extra food to some of the pregnant and lactating mothers to see what would happen. And what they found was incredible. For the pups of the well-fed mothers, that negative effect of competition on their telomeres, it completely disappeared. This proves that the whole problem really comes down to one thing: competition for nutrition. Okay, so the big question is, does this telomere length stuff actually matter for survival? And the answer is a resounding yes. It matters a lot. The data shows a direct link. A pup's chance of surviving all the way to adulthood is significantly higher if it has longer telomeres when it's just a few weeks old. The connection is undeniable. In this brutal world, longer telomeres literally give you a better shot at life. So let's put all the pieces together now. We can see this clear line connecting the queen's brutal social strategy all the way down to a measurable biological advantage for her own children. This is survival of the fittest, playing out right at the molecular level. And this is what you could call the queen's evolutionary masterstroke. First, by committing infanticide, she takes out the competition, on average about 4 rival pups. With fewer rivals, her own litter gets much better nutrition. That improved nutrition protects her pups from the stress that shortens telomeres. In fact, researchers estimate that this whole strategy makes her pups' telomeres about 7.3% longer. And as we just saw, longer telomeres mean a much higher chance of survival and future success. It is a complete, brutal, and perfectly closed loop system of dominance. Which leaves us with one last, kind of provocative thought. When you strip away all the cute fur and just look at the raw mechanics of power, of succession, of doing whatever it takes to ensure your own lineage survives, is a meerkat mob really all that different from, say, a human royal court?